What's the importance of the genealogies? It links the first Adam to the second Adam. It links the fall of man to the Redeemer. Do you know those genealogies in Luke? What did they do? Jesus, the son of, the son of, the son of, the son of Adam, the son of God. Jesus is linked back as the Redeemer to the man that caused the fall, our predecessor. That's what the genealogies do. They show there's a direct link. They show that there's a link back to David. They show there's a link back to Abraham. They show there's a link back to Noah. That's what the genealogies are. They're like the skeleton that all of this is held on. Another thing, it links all humans to the first Adam and Eve. In other words, all people are fallen and we all are lost from birth. In other words, there's no distinction of people on the face of the earth. There's no good people and bad people. They're lost people, or if they're redeemed, they're saved people. It doesn't depend upon what part of the world you're from. We're all linked back to these two people, Adam and Eve. And we bear the consequences of their actions. It also links all races to Noah and back to Adam indirectly. There's no basis for racism. We're all descendants of Noah. We're all brothers and sisters in the flesh. Anyone wants to raise these racial issues, you say, hey buddy, where'd you get that? That guy's your brother over there. What are you talking about? You're in the same soup that he is. So there's no basis for racism because of the chronology. We're all linked back, and our blood shows that. Our DNA shows we're all linked back. In fact, the genetics today show that we're all linked back because each of you got your egg from your mother, and so they can trace you back through your mitochondrial DNA, and we're all linked back to a mitochondrial Eve, they call her. They don't believe in Eve, but we're all tied back. And all men get their Y chromosome from their father, and do you know what that shows? All the races are linked back to one man about 300 generations ago. They call him the Y chromosome Adam. It's interesting. Well, what is the Bible's got something new? No, science is just catching up on it. So we're all linked back. There's no basis of racism. It links all languages as God's creation at the Tower of Babel. Instead of this deal of the languages evolved over a period of time and that's how they are. No, they were given by God. We all spoke one language at one time and we were divided into races that we have now, not a basis for racism, by languages. And God created those languages. And if you are any scholar of languages, you'll know that every language on the face of the earth was more sophisticated in the past than it is today. Sanskrit, linked to the Indo-European languages, is way more sophisticated. The older languages are much more sophisticated. English is complicated because it's all messed up. It's degenerated too much. But you take your Semitic languages, they're all tied together. And they were more sophisticated in the ancient writings. Greek, classical Greek's more complicated than Koine or Byzantine or modern Greek. And the Chinese languages, the Japanese languages, they're all tied together by their written languages, but not by spoken languages, and they were more complicated in the past than they are in the present. These chronologies and genealogies give exact history of the universe back to the creation a short time ago, especially Genesis 5 and 11, the genealogies. It establishes man as created in God's image. We're all sons of God. We're different from the animals. We didn't evolve from the animals. It establishes man as the Lord of the universe, not angels or Satan. They want to be, but it's not given to them as their domain. The chronologies serve as a basis for the covenants, especially the beneficiaries of the covenants. Let's get some details of the genealogies that some people confuse. Son can mean one or more generations removed, i.e. Jesus is the son of David, the son of Abraham in Luke 3. So you can have people in between. But when son, it doesn't mean just the direct son. It can be the grandson or it can be generations removed. However, like in Genesis 5, there are no gaps in time. There may be gaps in persons, but there's no gaps in times because it gives the age of the father to the birth of the son, okay? Then it gives the age from the birth of the son to the end of his life, and then it gives the whole number of years to his life. There's no flexibility. There may be intermediate people between, but the time frames are fixed. It's locked up tight. And Genesis 5 is tight. And the reason is because so people don't miss how long ago this took place. There's possible intermediate progeny, but no intermediate years. Genesis 5 is the only super tight genealogy. Genesis 11 is also a tight genealogy. It doesn't give the total number of years, but it gives the years from the man's birth to the birth of his son, and then from the birth of his son to the end of his life. And if you can add up, you can get up to the same thing that you do in Genesis 5. It's tight. It's interesting that these are the only genealogies that tie things together like that. The others just give names. Because by that time, you're down to Abraham. And the part that's in question is from Adam to Abraham. But these are tight. It gives the age of the father to the birth of the son and the years of the father after the birth of the son. Genesis 11 is also a tight genealogy from the birth of the father to the birth of the son with no gaps in time. Covenant from Eden, the Edenic covenant. In the day that you shall eat of the tree, you shall surely die. Did it take place? Adam's not alive today, is he? None of his descendants are alive except those that are walking around. In 100 years from now, there won't be any of us here if time continues. The Adamic covenant with Adam. You remember in Genesis 3:15, after the fall of man, he says to Satan, he says, the seed of the woman shall bruise your head. You shall bruise his heel. What took place? The seed of the woman? The seed of Mary? The woman, not of Joseph? What happened? Was his heel bruised? Yes. He died on the cross. But he rose again. What's going to happen to Satan, though? You see the imagery? He'll be crushed in the end. The promise of a future Redeemer is given in the very beginning of the covenant. Right with the fall is the giving of the promise. Christ over Satan. Here's the genealogies of Genesis 5. This takes you from Adam to Noah. This gives the name. This gives the age of the birth, at the birth of the son. This is the years after the birth. And this is the total years of the life. Now, a couple interesting things. You add these up, and there's 1,656 years from the creation of Adam to the time of the flood, the 600th year of Noah. Some notes. Methuselah, he's Noah's grandfather, died in the year of the flood, and his father, Lamech, died 5 years before the flood. The average age, excluding Enoch, who was raptured, he was taken away. He didn't die. It says, for God took him. He was a righteous man that was taken out. To give us an example of what lies ahead for the future when Christ comes, the average age is 912 years of natural life of all of these ancient patriarchs until the time of Noah. This is a comparison of the genealogies in other places. This is in Genesis 5. This is in 1 Corinthians 1 in the Old Testament. And this is Luke 3. And they're exactly the same, as you can see. This takes you all the way down to Noah. And there's 1,656 years in this period of time. Noah, this is the father of mankind after the flood. We're all descendants from Noah. The sin of the ungodly unions and the sinful actions of the antediluvian means before the flood race, resulted in God's judgment by the flood. Said that the world was all corrupt, and we'll see this in the next session. Noah was a preacher of righteousness that lived before this time, and he's chosen by God to build an ark. And all the rest of the world was condemned. The flood would kill every land animal, not just man. Everything that breathed that was on the face of the earth. Now, it didn't kill the animals in the sea. A lot of them are fossilized. They were killed in the flood, but they survived and they didn't have to be saved from the flood. After the flood, God establishes his covenant with Noah and his descendants. That's all of mankind, signified by the rainbow. God set up a new dispensation for all mankind, which continues to this day. He established one human government with the right of judgment. He allowed diets to include eating of meat. He placed the fear of man in animals. He reduced the age of man to 120 years from this 912 average. Men were not allowed to eat meat before the flood, and the provision for animals afterwards, when men could eat them, then they're given the right to be afraid and to escape from men. It's a good provision for animals. Because men aren't particularly good, God knew that. They're going to treat the animals very good. Noah, the Noahic covenant. I will establish my covenant with you and your descendants. In other words, all of us here. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and offered burnt sacrifices on the altar. The genealogies of Genesis, this is 11. This takes you from the flood of Noah to Abraham. And this is a lot shorter period of time, as you can see. The ages are cut down, and there's only 352 years between the flood and the birth of Noah. Do you know what's significant about that? Do you know how old Noah lived after the flood? 350 years. So he died about the time that Abraham's born. These are short periods of time. There's only 352 years between the flood and the birth of Abraham. Abraham we're assuming, is 75 years when he leaves Haran. He went over there with Terah, his father, and Terah was 205 years old when he died, and we assume that Abraham left just shortly in that same year. His father, by the way, Terah, was headed for the land of Canaan, but he never got there. We don't know why he was leaving Ur of the Chaldees, which is over there near the Gulf of the Arabian Gulf, and he was headed, it says, toward there, but he stopped in Haran and never got that way, about halfway there. So Abraham continues the journey, and that's when God talks to him and says, hey, leave your family and come with me to the land that I'll give to you and your descendants. Arphaxad was born, that's the son of Shem, about 2 years after the flood of Shem, and this in Genesis 11:10. We assume in this that Terah dies at 205 years in Haran, in the same year that Abraham leaves Haran at 75 years old. Then Terah would be then 130 years old when Abraham is born.